So I have worked in coffee for 12 years, thereabouts. I think my first experience with coffee was in my childhood. I can't really remember the age, but very little. I used to drink only chocolate milk. As a kid, parents always give their children milk, right? So they can grow taller and all that. But I only like chocolate milk. And then at one point, I was diagnosed with asthma, so like with breathing problem. And then the family doctor told my mom that, oh, he cannot have chocolate anymore. So then my mom switched from chocolate milk to normal milk. And then I didn't want any of the milk because it didn't have any flavor back then. So she started putting a little bit of instant coffee in my milk so that I would drink my milk or have my calcium, protein, whatever. So that was my first experience of coffee, and that I guess I got addicted to coffee that way.
それでもだいぶ幼少期ですよね。そこからもう仕事でコーヒーやろうって思ったわけではないけどきっかけだって話ですよね、それね。
So I was studying in Melbourne for university, and then I was working in retail, like retail fashion and all that, and for a part-time job. And I didn't really feel passionate in that area. And obviously, being in Melbourne, there were a lot of cafes. The coffee culture was very, very pronounced everywhere you go. So I was already drinking coffee back then quite a bit. And I thought, oh, this is an interesting industry to work at. So I applied, and I didn't start as a barista, but started as dishwashing, waitressing, and then eventually they taught me how to make coffee. So it started that way. And then maybe around 3 years after I started, I realized that there is a pathway of World Barista Championship, because in 2013, there's a World Barista Championship in Melbourne. They were the host. So it was for the first time I see that, oh, there's a career path that I could take to be the best in the world at what I do. Because when I was growing up, my parents, especially my dad, he always say, oh, you can do whatever you want in the world, but make sure you are the best in the world at that job. So I took it literally, and I pursued that path from 2015 seriously. Yeah.
僕はその2013年の WBC オーストラリア行ってました。コーチとして。
Ah.
Hide.
Oh, Yoshi. Oh, Hide. Yes.
Hide. Yeah. First time challenge.
Yes.
Hide. Exactly. 予選落ちでしたけど、行ってましたね。だからそれをじゃあパートタイムジョブで見てたってことですね。
After I finished my master's degree in Melbourne, 2016, I think, I was trying to figure out what I want to do with my life in terms of career and all that. And I came across this Japanese philosophy called the Ikigai, trying to figure out your Ikigai, right? And after answering all that little circles of what I am the best in the world at, what I could be paid for, what serves the community, all that, the answer was coffee. So from that point on, 2016, I made sure that every career decision or life decision was to answer this question: will that decision take me one step closer to becoming a World Barista Champion or not? And then because of that, I always just pursue that one coffee career, but also if this is going to get me closer to that dream.
いや、いいお話でした本当に。その後すぐに帰国して、インドネシアでコーヒー屋をスタートするんですか？
No, as a quality control and marketing manager at one of the specialty coffee chain in Indonesia. Yeah.
今は自分の会社ですよね。いつ頃創業されたんですか？
So the first one was 2019 after Boston. There was a partnership between me and my employers. So my previous employers, they I guess rewarded me with sort of making me a partner in the business. So that's the first company that I started, which is the consulting company. And then the second company is an Indonesian export company that started during COVID 2021. And then we have a few sister companies under that company doing different things. But the new one is a cafe, Oma Cafe, that started in 2023. So now I have about 3-4 different companies that fit the coffee ecosystem. I always want to, because championship is my life, right? It's my goal, my life. So I would like to build an ecosystem so that whatever I talk about in the championship also reflects my life and my work on the day-to-day life outside of competition. And that's why after Boston, there's a new company. And then just before Milan, there's a new company. And then just before Busan, there's a new company. So it's all reflected. Whatever I do on stage is reflected in real life.
いや、素晴らしいバイタリティだなと思うし、すごくいい話でした。そんな自分のね会社の創業と、戦ってる中、今年、WBC のプサンで見事優勝したわけですけど、優勝した瞬間のその心境、どう思ったか、どう感じてたかっていうその時の心境をちょっと聞かせてもらえますか。
I visualize a lot. Like I visualize my goals and I visualize my dream a lot. And in that visualization, I always think about, oh, my name will be called last, and then Boram will come and give me my trophy, and then, oh, how heavy the trophy is, how should I carry that trophy, and what should I do after I receive that trophy? So as soon as I was announced the winner, I was just executing those moves in my head. I wasn't really living in the moment and enjoying my win. I was just, because in my head it happened so many times, so when it happened in reality, I was just doing what I've just been doing in my head. So I sort of forgot to enjoy the moment, and then it took me a few weeks to sort of let it settle, and it's like having a new pair of shoes, you know, like it didn't feel right when you first wear it, but then after a few weeks it started to feel right. So it was kind of like that with me.
ファイナルラウンドの競技が終わって発表までの間実感はあったのか。そう、つまりやりきったし、ひょっとしたら俺チャンピオンかもしれない、優勝してるかもしれないとかっていうね、そういう実感とか気持ち、その時の心境はどうでしたか。
Yes, well I felt it before my final performance. I think obviously it was final round, so I was a little bit anxious as well. I couldn't really sleep the night before, things like that. But on that day, things just start to feel right. And at least in my heart, it felt like it's already mine. I just need to do my 15 minutes and do everything the best that I could do that day, and then it's mine. It's not like I wasn't sure, oh, am I gonna win or not? I was sure that if I just do these things, I would win. So it's I guess it's a feeling of confidence, and also a feeling that my 9 years of journey was to prepare me for that one day. So it felt as real as this cup right here on that day. After I finished, I knew I went overtime. So after I finished, I felt like I've done the best that I could. I knew I did the best that I could, and I knew that everyone was there with me, the judges, the crowd, and everyone who was there. I could felt their presence and their energy with me. So I had the confidence.
ちょっと競技の中身について、聞いてみたいんですけど、プレゼンテーションでマインドフルネスっていうのをすごいやってましたね。ですごい新しいプレゼンテーションの形だなと僕はすごい思ったので、なんでああいうものを思いついてああいうことをステージでやろうとしたのかっていうのをちょっと教えてください。
I guess the sort of happened on parallel. of what's happening in my life and what's happening in barista competition. So what's happening in barista competition is that there's a rule change in 2022 or 2023 that allows a much higher score for presentation score. So before then, the weight for scoring is very high on espresso, and then gradually it gets lower and lower as you go down the score sheet. Whereas now, or since 2022, the score for presentation is almost as big as your milk beverage scores. So that allows for a new style of presentation that not only talks about coffee innovation, but also talk about human things like teamwork or mindfulness. Well, being mindful of that change make me realize that I can, well, it really fits my presentation style, because I always, as a barista competitor, I'm always more about the story rather than the coffee. So I realized I could talk about stories, and then the coffee will have to fit that stories. And while trying to look for topics for my 2024 season, for a while I didn't know what to talk about, but then I realized I could talk about my journey and how I felt being burned out after I lost in Milan. So after Milan, I poured all my soul, I put all my effort into that competition. And then I was heartbroken when I didn't get called to the final. So I took a 2 years break, and then that 2 years was basically try to find myself back into coffee. And I realized with the rule change, now I can actually talk about this journey rather than talk about the same old fermentation technique or talk about coffee innovation.
今の話をちょっともう少し僕は聞きたいんですけど、この WBC とかあと各国のリージョナルの大会もそうなんですけど、何回も挑戦する人もいるし、今のミカエルさんの話みたいに燃え尽きてもうやめてしまってボロボロになっちゃう人もいると思うんですよね。でその時に今バーンアウトしたっていう焼き切れたっていうのかな、日本語でそういう言葉を使ってましたけど、その時に焼き切れてもうやりきってもうダメだってなっちゃったってことだと思うんだけど、それはもう一度やるために休もうっていう前提でそもそもこう2年間の休養に入ってたのか、それとももう本当に一回ダメになってもうちょっともう大会いいわと、もう考えられない、もう出たくないみたいになったのか、なんかその時の心境をなんかちょっと聞きたいんですよね。数多く見る事例なので競技者としては。
Well, after Milan, I definitely still have that dream of being a world champion, right? And when I have a goal, I'm pretty determined and I don't really quit. But I realize sometimes you have to take one step back to move a few steps forward. So it was also, by that point, I was the barista champion for 3 years. And I didn't feel that it was right for me to also compete again just for the sake of competing in the national stage. Because as a barista champion, I have my topic and my agenda of what I want to talk about, but other people also have agenda and things that they want to talk about. So I felt that somebody else has to win first as a barista champion in Indonesia and do their thing. Happened to be my wife, but that's a different story. But also I knew, because I was really burnt out, I didn't know what else to talk about. I had to look for answers and find myself again in coffee, but not in championship. So I knew if I want to achieve my dream, I had to take a little bit of a detour to get me there.
なるほど、そうか。24年にもう一回出ようと 20年だから、プサンでもう一回こうリベンジしようっていうふうに思われたきっかけは何かあったんですか？
So after 2 years, I felt like I was ready to go again, and yeah, I still had that dream, and I felt like I wanted to pursue that dream, but also at the same time, I really wanted it to make it my last competition, win or not. So I knew I had to really prepare for it the best of my ability. And if there's only one thing left that I could talk about in barista competition, what would that be? And that's why it was very personal to me. Like I had to really open up myself and talk about my own struggle, so that even if there was the last time I talk on stage, I would be happy about it.
じゃあ今回世界一になれましたけど、なれなかったとしてももうこれで終わりにしようって決めてたんですね。
Well, I guess we'll never know because I did win. But I was ready for it to be my last year.
やっぱり大会にチャレンジすることにおいて重要な要素は今日の話の前半で出てましたけど、やっぱり素晴らしいコーヒーとの出会いだと思うんですよね。やっぱりミカエルさんのコーヒーはエスプレッソもシグニチャーミルクビバレッジももうとても評判が良くて、競技者の間からもやっぱりもう最高に良かったという声は聞きました、僕ですら。そうなので2つのコーヒーとはどうやって出会ってどういうふうにしてこう使用に至るっていう決定をされたのか、なんかその辺コーヒーとの出会いについてちょっと聞きたいんですけど。
I talk about mindfulness and harmonizing mind, body, and soul. The mind, I knew I had to find coffee that really showcased the power of the mind, using creativity to somehow take coffee that tastes ordinary, and then by using your creativity, by using your knowledge, you can make that coffee extraordinary. And then the body part comes from using whatever you thought about in your head and then actually doing it, using your hands, using your legs, using your eyes. So to illustrate that, we need to find coffee that went through a lot of processing, not just a simple wash or a simple natural, but I had to find a coffee that illustrate really the power of creativity and the power of the mind. So obviously with the past few years, Colombian coffees have been in that forefront of processing and innovation. So I knew I had to find, or at least I knew my answer would most likely be from a Colombian coffee. And then for the soul part, normally we like to talk about the soul that is clean, right? Just when you're a baby, you're born, your soul is still pure and clean. So I know when I talk about that, I have to talk about the espresso, because espresso is just pure coffee and water. But also the taste profile that I need to illustrate that point is something that is a wash process or something that is similar to a wash process. And there's no other way to do that than using a geisha. Not necessarily from a specific country, but a wash geisha, people know that is the purest and clearest expression of that variety. I was looking at different coffees, but also looking at trend over the past few years. Before me, 2023, a geisha one, but a anaerobic natural geisha, right? And then before that, it was a Eugeniodes anaerobic, it was actually a Colombian Sidra one, heavily processed. Before that, it was a Eugeniodes, also heavily processed. So for the past 3 years before I won, all the coffees that won have been heavily processed coffees with a lot of processing flavors, not variety flavors. So when I chose coffee for that espresso and talk about the soul, I wanted to have coffee that is washed to showcase the variety. So I tried a lot of different geishas. A lot of them were definitely Panamanian geisha, but May is a very challenging period for Panamanian geisha because normally they start harvest around February, so May is too fresh. but I found one that was harvested apparently only 2 weeks earlier than normal, but that 2 weeks is enough to taste good in Busan.
ありがとうございます。本当にね競技会の、醍醐味とか難しさが、いっぱい詰まった話でしたね。やっぱギリギリになってからそのパナマを採用するということとか、あとやっぱマインドフルネスの思いからそのコロンビアの複雑な発酵のものを使ったっていうのは本当に素晴らしい話でした。でこの後はですね、なんとミカエルさんが使ったコーヒーエスプレッソは、パナマの芸者で、ミルクビレッジはコロンビアのコーヒーだったんですけど、そのコロンビアの生産者とであとその生産者グループをまとめて輸出をしているロハス・ビーンさん、この辺りのメンバーがここに来てくれているので、こちらにぜひねお招きしてからちょっとお話を伺いたいと思います。これは
その通りです。
ルワックいいですか？
オンブリゴンルワック。
オンブリゴンルワック